Welcome to the program. I'm Mark Imperial. This segment's being brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. So the Great Resignation is all in the news. People are retiring or resigning to maybe do something more significant in their lives. So we're doing a series of spotlights on remarkable business brokers from across the country. Joining me on this segment is Brian Jones from the Sunbelt Business Brokers. Brian, welcome to the program.
Oh, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Brian, tell us a little bit about your business and who specifically are the folks that you specialize in helping?
Well, typically we focus on the sellers that are interested in selling their business, and due to the baby boomers retiring in record numbers, we're seeing an uptick in those opportunities. And we typically focus probably between around businesses that will have sales of between 500,000 and 10 million. So usually in that range, and it's not really a specific vertical. It's very horizontal. We look at all sorts of businesses. However, some of the business brokers like myself tend to focus on verticals because they have knowledge of that area, and referrals come, and it just grows organically, and somehow they specialize that over time, and it works that way usually. I'm very horizontal just because of my background, so I cover a wide variety of businesses.
Well, since you went there, give me a little bit of your background and tell us, on that horizontal plane, what are some of the fields that you specialize in helping?
Well, my background's fairly diverse. I've gone all over the place. I have an entrepreneurial type of background. Started my own business at a very young age. Of course, it failed. Being very young, it had a lot of energy, not a lot of focus or knowledge, I'd say. And then after that, I went into the private sector as believe it or not, as an electronics technician. That's what I did. I actually, back in the day when you had circuit boards, they're throwaway now, but back in the time, a small circuit board about this size would be worth about, $1,000, $2,000, $3,000. So we used to fix those and replace components and whatnot. But after a while, I got a little boring, so I had an opportunity to get into the marketing side just because of my technical knowledge. And from that point, just over time, just kept stepping up in different opportunities, started a couple other businesses, sold those, and then realized, man, I really need to get into the business brokerage. But during that time, I worked with Microsoft. I had my own software development company and those sorts of things. And that really helped me on the technical side, understanding a lot of businesses that have a technical nature. For instance, one of the businesses that I recently sold was a solar powered pump company who provided solar energy powering direct current type pumps all around the world. And I had unique knowledge of that technology, and that's why the seller actually chose me, because of that knowledge. So that was very helpful to me. And
Fascinating.
but I focus on, I'm selling a flower shop right now as well. So it's all over the place for me, and I like the diversity.
That's great. Yeah, that diversity gives you the experience to know if you can sell like some of the hardest things and the most technical things in the world. The more straightforward things, probably even easier. so
Right. Yeah, exactly. And
Brian,
yeah,
with
great.
this great resignation that people are talking about, have you seen an uptick in inquiries, people wanting to buy a business and go into business for themselves? Who are these folks?
Absolutely. Well, I don't know about your career, but somewhere along the line we had the cube jobs, right? Where you sit in a cube or something like that.
The
And
Dilbert cube.
yeah, yeah, boy, I can identify with a lot of those comments, which I'm sure that's why it did so well. A lot of people could. But yeah, you'll put in a serious amount of time, 40, 50, 60, sometimes 80 hours a week in these jobs, and ultimately just to be passed over for promotions, or maybe just let go, or you just get fed up, and it's people see it's kind of like a snowball effect. A couple of people do it, and they become successful. A couple of their friends say, "Hey, Joe did it. Joe's not that bright, so I know I can do it." Those sort of things. And then over and over, it keeps growing like a network marketing event. It just keeps growing. I think that a lot of that's happening. I mean, granted, there's some people that are quitting and maybe the lower paying jobs and hope to get unemployment for a while and get a free ride. But I think a lot of people are actually looking just for new opportunities. And it really has increased my activity. When I list a business for sale, I'd say about 40–50% are those people. So we definitely get those interests from those individuals, and they've got the 401ks to buy the businesses. Usually they'll have 2 or 300,000. That's all it really you need is about 10% of the asking price going through the SBA. If you can make that threshold, then you've got a good chance of buying a business.
Well, let's look at the elephant in the room. This
Mm-hmm.
tail end of this great pandemic that we've just gone through and are
Right.
continuing to go through. Is this a good time to get into business for yourself? What are the opportunities now?
Well, that's very strange. It doesn't seem to make sense, but if you've noticed, it's a combination of um, product not being available, but it's a combination of low productivity because there's not a lot of individuals out there. There's not as many individuals out there working, but people are buying more too. Um, I was looking for some property to buy prior the to the pandemic, and now I should have bought it then because all the properties I was looking at have gone up probably 30 or 40%, and people are just buying more. A company that I sold last year, their revenue went up. It was a trailer business. They were selling out 13. No, well, the previous year they were selling about 10.5 to $11 million a year of trailers. These are the ones you pull behind a truck, or not the big ones, but behind the truck. And during the pandemic, their sales went up about 20%, almost 20, just under 20. So it was great. The individual bought it, and he's making more money than ever now. So yeah, there's this resignation. Not as many people working. There's a pandemic, yet somehow retail is up. And if you've read the news, retail sales are up just about everywhere. And I don't know when this is all going to end, but yeah, right now anyway. The moral of the story is I wouldn't back off due to being a concern of sales going down. The only issue that you would have to research if you're buying a business, if you're selling products versus services is up as well. But if you're looking at products, make sure that the supply of products is ample enough to get into the market, where because that's the only companies that I've seen that have struggled. They just can't get product. So, but most of them they're doing really well.
That's sage advice, and yeah, I can relate to that. Retail therapy, if you will. I've been
Yeah,
purchasing quite a bit more myself, I
yeah,
must admit.
me
Uh,
too.
you know what else I noticed is strange? You mentioned service businesses. I see that service businesses are up. You mentioned a strange situation, and talk about a strange
Mm-hmm.
situation. They don't even seem to need to advertise these days because they got more
Right.
business than they can handle, and their problems are getting more technicians.
Yeah.
And then the restaurants, look at them. What's the opportunity specifically in restaurant business? Because they seem to have no problem. The demand is high, but they're having some staffing problems. Is there opportunity there?
Uh, Absolutely, but you hit the nail on the head. There's a little bit of product shortages, but nothing that could really hurt a business significantly if you don't plan. If you did, maybe you didn't plan properly, but it's staff. Um, it's just a real issue. I really see wages are going to have to go up in that sector. Now that will hit the bottom line, but most entrepreneurs understand they're just going to have to charge higher prices for foods and for dinners, lunches, and pass it on to the consumer. Consumers are expecting it now anyway. I made a quick rush over to lunch. Got something for myself and my wife on the weekend, and I don't know. I think it was a Wendy's or something. Anyway, one of those locations, and it was over $20 for a hamburger and fries, for a
Wow.
couple of folks. And back in the well, I'm an old guy, but I remember back in the day, it wasn't that much for sure. But everything's going up. Every time you look at things, it's just something that we are expecting. So I don't think entrepreneurs should be concerned about raising prices right now, but they have to be concerned about getting those individuals and somehow figuring out how to keep them.
And uh, my in my opinion, like that, the labor rates and that, and especially in the fast food sector, I think that's going to hit a bubble like everything else.
Mm-hmm.
It just doesn't seem sustainable. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And it is strange also in the service industry. You reminded me, the thing that I heard about is like HVAC. They're having problems getting parts. Like that's one of
Right.
their big issues. So, but eventually, supply chain will come back and everything's, so it still seems like a good opportunity. So Brian, speaking of folks that are looking to get into business and looking to buy a business, but not sure where to start, I imagine there's a lot of myths or misconceptions floating around the web, and people have wrong ideas in their minds. What are some of the big misconceptions you hear out there about, what it's like to buy a business?
Believe it or not, it's not very hard to buy a business if you find the right people to provide you services. Um, for instance, myself, I'm usually working with sellers, but I do help buyers from time to time. But what I would recommend to anyone interested in buying a business, and I highly recommend, if you have the funds and do the research, you can make a huge change in your life. When you're the owner and you control your destiny, a lot of these businesses, for instance, you buy a business for $500,000, you're only going to need about 50 or 60, $70,000 in most. And a lot of people have that in the 401k. And may say, well, gosh, SBA, I don't know. There's all these forms you got to fill out with the government. I don't want to have to deal with the government. Believe it or not, there are so many people out there now that they call them SBA packagers. And what they do is they do all that work for you. Now, it's for a fee. It can be anywhere from $1,500 to $3,000. You pay them the money, they do everything for you. They research all the banks. I've got one gentleman that helps me. He has access to over one. I wish it was 300. Over 100 banks in the state of Oklahoma, and he'll take the person's credit, all their financial information. He'll take the company that's being purchased and do the financial analysis on it. He'll take the results, share that with all these hundreds of banks, and there's always a bank or two that said, yeah, let's do this loan. We've got the funds, or we have something in the budget to do this. The problem is people get discouraged. They go to one bank, and the odds of that one bank doing it is not that great. But there's always a bank. One of these banks, they've got plenty of cash at the moment. Because remember, they're always moving cash in and out. Sometimes they can do it, sometimes they can't. Really large banks, they're usually pretty static on whether they're not going to do it or not based on financials. But the smaller banks, you can get loans through them, but you just got to hit the right one at the right time.
That's a really great insight, because I know that funding is probably the biggest point of
That's the hurdle.
contention, and
Yeah, that's the
causes a
hurdle.
lot of discouragement for
Right.
people.
Well, it's intimidating. Also, there is a negotiation process, but I would always recommend that you find a lawyer to help you negotiate the contract. Now, a business broker is probably the best on negotiating the price and the upfront um, up to a letter of intent. I'll work on that with the client. But once we get into the legal dealings, I can't practice law without a license, and I don't have a license. So at that point, we'll engage with a lawyer just to help and, so to speak, bless the purchase agreement. But pretty much after that, the deal can be had. And again, it's the financing that usually scares most folks. One last thing to consider before you go spend too much time, there is a risk associated with buying a business, and that is when you go to an SBA, go through the SBA process, the bank still has to say yes. The SBA supports the banks by backing the loan somewhere between 80 and 90%, which you think the banks would still move forward, but still they're just as hesitant if it's covered or not covered. But now I forgot what I was going to say. Oh my gosh! See, that's what happens. You hit 60. I
That's
can't remember
fascinating, though, that even if SBA was to back this up, why would a bank still hesitate?
Right. That I guess why I got sidetracked is that's one of my pet peeves with the SBA process. It's there to help people, and it tries to. but the SBA cannot control the bank agreeing to do a loan. I can't tell you how many qualified people I've had to get a loan, and for whatever reason, the bank backs out. And they say, wait a minute, this guy's got hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash, but for whatever reason, maybe it's the shortage of cash or something like that. By the way, I remembered what I was going to say. Basically, when you're buying a business, the thing you have to take in consideration is that you can lose your property because the bank will want you. They're going to go after your assets if this business fails. So it's not just like, oh, if I get the loan, it doesn't work out, I'm, oh well, it didn't work. No, they'll take your cars, your house, your properties to pay for that. So there is a risk there. So when you're doing your analysis of a business, make sure you feel comfortable with it, because there is a risk on your side as well. And that's where a lot of people back out when they realize, oh my gosh, my wife will kill me if I put my house up, and potentially lose it on this deal. So those are some things to think about, but definitely on the SBA side, there are people that will help and get that through. I don't do that, but I can definitely refer people to someone that can definitely help.
Has the world created a solution to mitigate any of those kind of risks of losing the house or the car? You see that in all the business television shows, and the families are all distraught. There really is no safety net, is there?
No, no, and again, what is it? What is it? I saw it on the crypto commercial. Something about something favoring the bold. I forgot what it was now. Anyway, yeah, you've got to take that risk if you want the benefit. You definitely have to take that risk, and that's the key point. Yes, you can actually lose everything, so it's something to consider. But at the same time, the rewards are magnificent if you pick the right business. For instance, that individual bought the trailer business. I mean, he's he's probably making probably over $1 million a year, and went from probably, I don't know what he was making before, but it was probably, about 80 or 90% less than that. But he took a risk, and he's working really hard, and he's very successful, and he'll probably pay off his loan in 8 or 9 years, and he'll be doing great.
So I'd imagine that you just do your due diligence and
Mm-hmm.
choose safer types of businesses. I imagine there's some that are probably safer than others. Brian, before I let you go, you mentioned you had that vast experience, and which then led you to hey, I got to get on the business brokerage side of this.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me what inspired you to do that, to go into the brokerage of businesses, coming from where you were?
Well, one of the things that I've found is with a lot of, I just say kind of an entrepreneur mind, we get bored so easy,
I
right?
can
I mean,
relate. It's
yeah,
ADD, entrepreneurial
right.
ADD.
Yeah, ADD. I think I definitely have some of that, and you know, it's just a feeling I get. It's usually about here to the 7 year edge. For some reason, about every 7 years, I worked for Microsoft almost seven. I had my own business, that software business for almost seven. I worked with another old computer company back in the heyday of computers, 7 years. I don't know why it just turned out that way, but anyway, that I get the itch to do other things. And one of the things I've learned as being a small business consultant, helping other companies make millions of dollars, and is that if you can really provide a service and make a difference. A lot of times you work with large companies, you're making a difference in some aspect, but when I help someone buy a business and completely change their life for the good, as well as help a seller sell their business, that they have no, I mean, most people have no idea how to sell a business, and it is involved. I mean, it is super stressful. You're talking about your life's work and giving it to someone else to sell for you. You're not in control anymore on this, and it's very stressful. And I can't tell you how many people have told me after some business, Brian, I couldn't have done this without you. I didn't realize it was so complicated. I might have not done it or been able to get it done if you weren't involved. And as well as people buying, I talked to them a couple of years later, said, man, I'm glad I talked to you. We're doing great. I've never had that with any other business. And that type of I mean, it's nice to make a difference, and we get paid well too. But the big thing is just the satisfaction of helping people get to their dreams. Either it's through retirement or getting a new business in their life, and it really is transformative as far as their finances. And usually, you get your finances up a lot higher than you ever thought they'd be. Usually things are better for most folks when it happens. So I really enjoy doing it.
That must be a really rewarding feeling, and I
Mm-hmm.
can relate to that entrepreneurial ADD. That's why I do this program. I get to live my life vicariously through other people's businesses
Yeah.
because that's what fascinated me the most. Is like, how do you do that? How did you start that business? So that's why
Mm-hmm.
I got
Well,
into this
it's just
program.
interesting story. When I first did it, it's kind of like a lot of things. You go, I don't know if I should have done this. When you first, if you've ever done anything sort of new, and this is definitely out of my kind of purview, but this business is a little tough in the first couple of years because your average sale is about somewhere between 6 and 8 months to sell a business. So you can imagine not having any prospects, getting your business going. You better save some money, a lot, for the first couple of years. But it's been really great since then. And but it is definitely kind of a leap of faith based on people I spoke to and reading and whatnot. And I'm glad I did it now. But for any of those of you who have jumped into a business and you're not quite sure if it was the right thing, you did it for a reason in the beginning. Stick with it, because usually those first 2 or 3 years they're always tough. And if you can hang in there, usually I'd say most people will be successful. That's why a lot of people fail. They just, okay, this isn't going to work, and it's not working fast enough. If you stick with it, usually you can get the job done. Probably much like your business here. You just got to stick with it and keep growing it.
That's really sage advice, and I'll add to that. I think linked to it is the fact that people chose a business they weren't passionate about, so it's easy to give up, like
Yeah,
too easy to give up too soon. But
right.
if you actually would have done it, even if you weren't getting paid, then it doesn't really work, and you'll actually stick to it and do great work, and you'll actually succeed that way
Right.
with
Yeah.
the right
It takes a
marketing.
while sometimes. Maybe it's in a tough market or something to that effect. But yeah, you're absolutely correct. If you're passionate about it, that passion shows to your clients. It does, and they see it. Not everyone does, but most people will, and that's it. That's definitely a great ingredient for success for sure.
Brian, for folks tuning in now that would love to speak with you, whether they want to sell a business or
Mhm.
perhaps see the list of businesses you might have for sale if they're looking to buy a business, how can they find you, connect with you, and learn more?
Okay. Well, the best way, just good old email is B Jones. It's Brian Jones. So it's B Jones at sunbeltnetwork.com. Send me a quick email, and I'd be happy to talk with what someone's interested in finding or potentially selling. And one of the things that I do, by the way, I can I do it's a free service. If someone wants to know what their business is worth, I have the ability to, and we'll just call it a ballpark, right? I can ballpark approximately what it would go for. If someone decides to sell, then of course we go into deep details of the business and get a much more exact selling price. But I definitely can look at a profit and loss statement for a couple of years, look at the balance sheets, and give someone an idea of what it would possibly go for. And that's just about in all verticals. The only vertical I probably stay away from today is oil fields. That's a very specialized market. I stay away from that, but pretty much everything else, I'm very confident that I come up with something for someone just to look at and maybe talk with me afterwards if they want to do something.
Excellent. Brian, this has been terrific. I really appreciate you taking the time and sharing with my audience today, and I
Yeah.
wish you continued success for you and for all of your clients.
Oh, thank you very much. Have a great day.
That was Brian Jones, Sunbelt Business Brokers, and this segment has been brought to you by booksgrowbusiness.com. It's the place where busy professionals get their books done to educate consumers, grow their businesses, and to leave a legacy. That's all for now. I'm Mark Imperial, and thanks for joining me.